Presumption of the teacher, or the three witches, the two shifts and the choice. Here are three witches facing us in English or literary studies. SysEd, Presentism and absent reading. That's what we're confronted with. SysEd, quite simply, is the over-systematisation of education and the forcing on teachers of a whole lot of para-teaching activity. This important research report came out in 2018, which indicated the overwhelming majority of teachers in New South Wales have this response to an increase in workload. Very importantly, the second paragraph says, our data is the first to make it clear that there is also another effect of changes to work in schools. The change is the rise in admin, the obstruction of teaching and students' learning. A very large majority of teachers now report that teaching and learning is hindered by their high workload, by having to provide evidence of compliance with policy requirements and by new administrative demands introduced by the Department of Education. This is important because it's an empirical study with a very consistent response from teachers about that high level of administrative work that they have to do, and that it is not enabling, it's hindering. Gabbie Stroud's great book is a wonderful example of that in the form of a personal memoir. Professional standards for teachers were looming like the bogeyman in my childhood hallway. I could hear him coming, screaming at me, you're accountable, you're accountable, you're accountable. I was creating new folders of paperwork, collecting evidence to show that I was competent, feeling tempted to create evidence that showed I was competent. Staff meetings became devoted to completing paperwork for professional standards. More meetings were held in the name of standards. The whole thing felt like an insult and a threat. That's SysEd, the over-systematisation of education, which is the context in which we work. The second which facing us is presentism, the overwhelming of the subject content that we teach in literary studies with the present and the self and the market. Throughout universities you can see it quite clearly, but also in schools, the dropping away of the historical literatures and the expansion of the focus on the present. And the focus on the present isn't just on the present, it's on me. It's about my narrative. How is literature telling my narrative? It's about the self. It's about encountering me and my voice coming through literary studies. And it's about the market. It's all about number of students, it's about saleability, it's about relevance, but relevance interpreted in the terms of the marketplace, not interpreted in other ways. There are other ways of interpreting the relevance of literature. Ancient historical literature can be massively relevant in terms of putting us into contact with otherness. Emphasis on the self relentlessly does not do that. The third which is a photograph of my daughter Abigail, who is here today with my son Nathaniel. The third which, absent reading, the decline of reading, a declining interest, ability, perhaps capacity in reading, especially extended texts or difficult texts. So there it is in my own home, and I reflect on young people today, and my phrase for it is their faces illuminated from the outside. Two broad educational shifts are underway. We're moving from over-systematisation to digitisation. Another shift, we're moving from assembly line schooling to living systems schooling, much more fluid arrangements. The shift then is from a management-driven over-systematisation that we've been embedded in for 20 years or so, which has pushed the teacher into a space where the teacher is a middleman, standing between the regulatory systems and the education of the student. And if the teacher's in the way, the teacher has to get in line with what the regulatory system says. That's why the teacher is defined as a problem so regularly. So we're moving from that. Hallelujah. It's going to be solved. We're going to AI Ed. We're going to the world of the algorithm. And we're halfway there already. The problem with the algorithm is it will be market-driven, not so much regulatory body-driven. It will be driven by companies, IBM, Pearson, other companies with their products. Regardless of the rhetoric, this has the ability to elide the middleman. The teacher's resistance has been weakened because the teacher has been told that their expertise is not as important as the system of which they're a part. That expertise has been worn down, and now the market is moving in. And if you thought regulators were hard to deal with, wait till you see corporations. The products that they will sell, the problems that they will tell you have that need to be solved, and that they have the package to solve it for you. So, we're also moving from the old-style industrial age, Fordist sort of schooling, to these more beautiful, aerated, fluid schooling arrangements. It's not all bad news out there by any means, but these are two big shifts that we're facing. Lindfield Learning Village in Sydney will be one interesting example to watch as they build that and roll that out with whatever it is. No school uniforms, no set class times, interacting communities of students, that sort of thing. All right, so we're faced with these three witches, with this over-systematisation, the emphasis on the present, the decline of reading. We're faced with the two shifts that I've just mentioned, and I think the future of education is going to have a whole lot of joy because it'll be full of gameplay. I think it's going to have a whole lot of cash because it's going to be all about the market and the companies coming into schools and universities with their educational packages. And obviously, the future of education is significantly about digitisation. So there's your choice. Are you going to be a middleman, or are you going to be an expert? And the reason I put it that way is because I think this is the choice. Now, all credit here to Paolo Blickstein, who has come up with these beautifully horrible acronyms, which is what we're all working on at the moment. It's to get the worst acronyms. WWTIFH. We will take it from here. Now, that is what the educational providers will say. For example, Pearson, the world's learning company. IBM, whoever it might be. I'm not doubting motives entirely here, and I'm not saying they're not full of genuine educators within those companies. But what I am saying is that the risk is that the market will say, we will take it from here. Now, where does that leave the teacher? And so that's why I'm working on a theory of the presumption of the teacher. And that's got two parts for me. One, education must presume a teacher. I want to be able to look forward educational futures and presume that a teacher is part of the equation. Somehow, a teacher is still part of the equation. As part of that, the second aspect is that that teacher must be allowed to be presumptuous. It cannot be all stitched up silently by algorithm and market. That we must presume the presence of the teacher as an expert and an authority amongst all these new things and shifts, but that teacher must have room to be presumptuous in what they do, to go off script, to do what they feel might be best at any one particular moment. Thanks.